So for this video, I'm going to be going through each of the black spells that are currently in Artifact, and I'm going to be talking about whether or not they see play in Constructed, whether or not they see play in Draft. If they don't see play, why is that necessarily the case, and what are the things in the future that might make them good if they're not good now. While this is a review video, I don't do like point systems, right? I'm not going to say this is a 4 out of 5 star card or anything like that, because in many cases, cards are only good or bad because of the meta, right? They're situational, so I'd rather talk about what makes them good now or not good, and then allow you, my very, very bright, intelligent viewers, to make your own decisions about when you would consider using that card. So, intro slash caveat out of the way, we're going to dive right in and start with Grazing Shot. Grazing Shot is a 1-mana spell that does 2 damage to a unit in any lane. Now, the utility of this card is both in the cost. Being 1 mana means that you can often play this with 1 if not more cards in your turn, but also the cross lane play, and that's the big one here. 2 damage by itself is just lackluster. It's not enough to kill even a melee creep on its own. There's only a handful of creeps in the game that have 2 health. Most of them don't see play as well. 2 health is a bit of a liability because it does mean that whatever it is you are playing will die to melee creeps. But Grazing Shot does still have some utility. There was a time in the closed beta where it was seeing play as like a 1-of in certain constructed decks. That's really no longer the case, but it does see play in Draft. The big difference is that in Constructed, the power level of your cards is just that much higher. The thing you have to remember with Constructed is your decks are 40 cards, and 15 of your cards are going to be taken up just from your hero choices. So really, deck sizes in Artifact, for all intents and purposes, are 25 cards. When you can run 3 of any given card in your deck, that does not leave a lot of room for individuality, right? That's essentially 8 cards out of 3 of, and then 1 as a 1-of, so you could run less than 10 total cards, and that would be your Artifact deck. So a card like Grazing Shot, which does have some utility, oftentimes will not make the cut in Constructed, but in Draft, the cross lane play makes this very attractive, specifically because Draft, you will sometimes find yourself running 3 colors, and when you do that, you typically have at least 1, if not more, but typically 1 color that is your splash. You have 1 hero of that color. Crosslane cards are great if that is something that you can make as your splash card. So if you splash black, the positioning of your hero matters a lot less if you're using cards like Grazing Shot or Gank or the mobile cards. So this does see play in Draft. It is, not something that you pick high. You don't prioritize it. But if you have to have, 1 of them, maybe even 2, it's not the end of the world. As I said, really you're focusing on the versatility and the utility of something like this. This card isn't meant to shift the game in your favor super drastically very often. That's by design. So, next up we have Relentless Pursuit. This is another 1-mana spell. It's another cross-lane playable card. This one reads, choose a unit in another lane. Then you move a random allied black hero from this lane to that lane, and you deal 2 damage to the chosen unit. If you're running 2 or 3 black heroes, Relentless Pursuit is actually pretty decent. 1 mana to provide almost the effect of a Blink Dagger is powerful, and on top of that you get to deal 2 damage to a unit when you move. So this is like a Grazing Shot plus a Blink Dagger combined, and that's pretty good. Now, the reason I say 2 or 3 black heroes is because, unlike the Grazing Shot thing, with this you want a little bit more options as far as like which black hero you're sending someplace. Also, the other thing to consider here as well is that you don't want too many black heroes, or you don't want a situation where you have multiple black heroes stuck in a lane, because you might want to send 1. Let's say you want to send your Phantom Assassin over because your Bounty Hunter has really low health, but if they're both in the same lane and you use this, it does choose a random black hero. So this is a card that shines when you have options in each of your lanes, but only 1 option. And when I say options, I mean black heroes. So that you can be a little bit picky about which hero you're being mobile with, but still guarantee your getting the hero that you want in the right position, in the right lane. So yeah, this is just like Grazing Shot, but with a Blink Dagger. I do personally, I will often find myself, not selves. I swear I don't have multiple personalities, I think. I find myself running this as a one-of in a few of my constructed decks. A lot of times if I have a crowded item deck, I justify maybe cheating out a Blink Dagger and only running 2, and then sticking in a Relentless Pursuit. So you can maybe consider running it in constructed. It's not ultra popular, but it's not unheard of. And in draft, it's right up there with Grazing Shot. It's not the sort of thing that you necessarily prioritize, but the utility is strong, the cross-lay playability is strong, the fact that it provides mobility, that's a big deal in draft, because in draft you don't have item decks with 3 Blink Daggers in it. So I think that the value is much higher in draft, but you also have to have black heroes that you want to be moving around. So if you've drafted like a Phantom Assassin or a Bounty Hunter early on, something with a high health and a high attack for a black hero, picking up a Relentless Pursuit is typically a solid move. Alright, I'm going to try to stutter less now and ramble less now. Let's pick up this pace here. Dirty Deeds. This is going to make it easier to speed through some of these. Dirty Deeds is a 3-mana spell. Deal 2 damage to the enemy tower for each of its improvements. This card does not see play in constructed, doesn't really see a lot of play in draft, and it's just not very good because this is one of those cards that is meant as a counter or maybe to punish your opponent, where if they're developing a bunch of improvements, then you can potentially burst that tower down. The problem is if they've developed a bunch of improvements, you're likely not winning that tower anyway. You don't have a lot of presence there. You know, they've probably ramped, like, if somebody double Selemane's Favor into a lane, then your Dirty Deeds does 4 damage, but meanwhile they are probably playing Time of Triumph on you. You know, if somebody drops a March of the Machines or a Conflagration against you, yeah, you can deal some bonus damage to their tower, but you probably lost your army. So this is just not good right now. If there ever becomes a meta or a future where there's just a ton of like really cheap improvements flying around, think like the Rookery, if there's like a million of those running around at some point, maybe Dirty Deeds rides in value, but right now it is just not good. Forward Charge. This is a 3-mana spell. Give allies +2 siege this round. All allies change their combat target to the unit or tower across from them. So the idea here is that you use this when you're just trying to force damage through. This doesn't see a lot of play in constructed right now, but I have had some success with it in certain drafts, and even then it was as a one-of. And I say certain because typically if I'm playing this, I'm usually playing blue, and it's a blue draft where I've drafted either a lot of Dimensional Portals or maybe I got Canna. But basically, if you have the kind of board where you can go wide, in draft, there's far less AoE clears, area of effect clears, that your opponents have access to, so your go-wide boards are more likely to be persistent and stick. And so the things that typically will gum you up in those scenarios in draft is when you get some arrows that don't go your way. You know, you'll get a unit that lands solo and 2 things will curve towards it, so it's soaking up 3 units worth of damage. Forward Charge can obviously fix that for you. And then even if you're going wide and they're also going wide and it's a very contested lane, this can give everything siege, so you can punch through a lot of damage. You know, if you've got even just 5, right? Like let's say 3 creeps and 2 heroes in a lane, but they're all blocked. This turns into 10 damage on a tower because it's all allies, so it is creeps, it is heroes. So this can be very, very powerful. Again, for me, I typically will only include it in drafts where I'm going to have a wide board or I expect to have a wide board, but you can find success with this card. And this could see play in a constructed environment where things like At Any Cost and Annihilation are far less popular. If there comes a day where AoE board clears are less favorable to just spamming units, you know, playing a ton of creeps, then Forward Charge would rise in value in that scenario. But right now, not played in Constructed, and it's got like a niche case use in Draft. Next up we have Payday. This is really straightforward. 3 mana, double your gold. That's right, double. So if you have 1 gold, Payday gets you 1 gold. But if you have 15 gold, Payday gets you 15 gold. And that is where the value is. This saw a lot of play in the closed beta. It's still seeing some play even in Constructed now. There are a lot of what they call econ decks or gold decks. Payday is like a backbone. This and the Hero Bounty Hunter. Simply because if you can land an early track with Bounty Hunter and kill that hero, that gets you 15 gold. And then a single Payday after that, not even counting other gold that you would have earned, will double it and allow you to buy any item in the game because they all cap out at 25 gold. So you can get a Horn of the Alpha, and that's a really big swing in tempo early on in games. Now, that being said, this strategy is very high rolly, meaning that when it goes well, it tends to really go well, and when it doesn't go well, it tends to not really go well. Which is why it's not necessarily, popular or favored in certain matchups. You are sacrificing consistency for the ability to just blow out certain wins. But it does see play in Constructed. In Draft, it's a little bit trickier because you have less reliable ways to earn gold. Much like Forward Charge, this can be played as a very niche card. If you draft a Bounty Hunter or like 2 Bounty Hunters, or you draft a Bounty Hunter and maybe a Gold Mine or something like that, then running a Payday is fine. But if you have no other ways to generate gold in your draft deck, and most of your items, because your item deck in Draft is like half basics sometimes, there's times where, like, even if you get a sweet Payday, you have nothing to buy with it. So it just loses a lot of value in Draft. This is a much more constructed style card because you want to build around it. Next up we have Slay. 3 mana, condemn a creep. Pretty straightforward, pretty elegant, pretty powerful. So this does see play in Constructed. There was a time in the closed beta where it was like a auto include 3 of. It was pretty ubiquitous in black decks. That's since faded. A lot of that had to do at the time with the fact that Payday decks were also really popular, and so Slay was meant to buy you some time against an opposing Horn of the Alpha that made a Thunderhide pack. Even still today, though, you will see a lot of decks that might run like 1 Slay, or maybe even as a 2 of. The idea being that you might be able to snipe like an Emissary of the Quorum against the Storm decks if they're an inexperienced player that hasn't gusted you or locked you out. But you don't see it as a 3 of because people aren't just playing like big high value creeps if they can't protect it. Like your average player now, like as I record this, is just much more savvy than they were when the game was first released, or even more so when people had limited time playing this in the closed beta. So Slay loses value when your opponent is just smarter about deployment. Like that's kind of just the reality of it. So it does still see some play in Constructed, but typically like as a 1 of, like a bail you out kind of thing. It can be really good for getting things out of the way of your own heroes, so it can be very beneficial to push damage through to the enemy tower. If you've got a Bounty Hunter that has its Janata proc and you want to be doing that 11 damage to the enemy tower, but there's a melee creep in front of it, sometimes using a Slay on the melee creep is the right call if it means dealing 11 extra damage. So it does see some play in that regard. As far as Draft goes, it's great in Draft. Creeps are far more prevalent. In fact, they have a much higher value in Draft because of the lack of annihilations and at any costs and things like that. And as such, you're more likely to see creeps that are of a higher impact or a higher value on the board, right? You're more likely to see people just hardcast Thunderhide pack as opposed to getting them from Horn of the Alpha. You're more likely to see our 7/2/7 Ogre friends. You're more likely to see, even stuff like the Satyr that restores the mana to your tower, things like that. Slay can really be beneficial in Draft because of the wider range of creeps that you run into. So it is good in Draft, still playable in Constructed, and like anything, this will rise in value if the number of creeps that your enemies are playing also rises, or at least high impact creeps. Next up we have Arcane Censure. 4 mana, modify the enemy tower with -1 mana. So this is a permanent modification on the enemy tower, but this does not see a lot of play. And the reason this doesn't see play is because it slows your opponent down, but it doesn't do anything to make your existing board state any better. So something like Tyler Estate Center, for example, has this same effect, and even if it is a temporary effect, has the same effect while also developing your board. You get a big 2/8 body out of it. This does nothing. So you may or may not slow down your opponent, but you didn't do anything to speed up the clock. You didn't do anything to increase your own tempo. And as such, this card just is not popular in Constructed. It is not really popular in Draft, where the fundamentals matter. It's just not very good at the moment. Collateral Damage. Modify a black hero with +3 Siege. This card is also just not seeing play. Siege has the potential to be really powerful. It creates inevitability, but the truth is, in Constructed, why do I care about giving my black hero Siege when I can just kill whatever's across from my black hero and punch the tower that way? That's the reality of it, right? I would rather run some of the other spells that cost 4, and we'll get to those in a moment, to just kill the creeps that are in front of my black hero and then hit the tower for full damage, as opposed to slowly deal 3 damage over time. You know, if this was modify a unit with +3 Siege, so that you could put this even on like a creep or something, it might be playable, but it doesn't see play in Constructed, and it doesn't even see play in Draft, because again, it's just low impact. It doesn't do enough, so not very good right now, especially because it's in black. I know black is kind of like the Siege color, but black has also got a lot of tools for killing things, and so it feels a little bit weird. Alright, Coordinated Assault. 4 mana, modify a black hero with, after you play a black card, give this hero and its allied neighbors +2 attack this round. So it is worth noting that when you play this, it counts itself, because it's the after part. And you know, a lot of times this is, you know, a +2 buff to 3 units when you play it, and then you get some additional value in later rounds. I have actually seen this played in Constructed. Typically when I do see it, it's in mono black aggressive decks. I don't necessarily think those decks are like tier 1 competitively viable, but they can be a lot of fun, and this certainly fits and works in those decks. You know, if you've got a draft where you have you know, 2 or 3 black heroes, then this can be really powerful. Specifically, if you've drafted enough good other black cards and you're running 3 black heroes, you can get a lot of value out of this. It's very, very good in those cases. And in Draft, where fundamentals matter a lot more, anything where you can get kind of this incremental value over the course of many turns, like you can with this card, it can shine. It can really stand out. So it's played a little bit in Constructed, kind of niche decks. Does see play in Draft, but again, you kind of want to have to have the cards to support it. You know, if you're splashing black and you only have 1 black hero, you're probably not including Coordinated Assault. Yeah, it just kind of depends. But next up we have Gank. 4 mana, choose an allied black hero, choose another unit in any lane, and they battle each other. This card is very good. It 100% sees play in Constructed. I do play it in Draft as well. It is, you know, cross-lane kill potential on a big scale, even more so if you have cards like Phantom Assassin or even Bounty Hunter. Basically, any black hero with high health. Lich can even be really powerful with this because of his ability to survive the encounter as well. But Gank allows you to shut down enemy heroes before they get a chance to do things in a round. It's very, very powerful. It's a very strong effect, and I can't imagine this waning in popularity anytime soon. Yeah, it's just that good. I mean, I don't want to drone on about this one. This one is very, very good. Cross lane capability is why, and because it it kills heroes and then locks them out of playing things. So next up we have Hipfire. 4 mana, deal 4 damage to a unit, get initiative. This card is actually pretty good as well. I'm a fan. Deal 4 damage to a unit means it will kill a melee creep. So if it's in front of one of your heroes and you're trying to push tower damage, then this gets the job done. And sometimes the 4 damage is enough to kill off an enemy hero. The big thing here is actually the get initiative, because initiative matters a lot in black-based decks because of cards like Gank and then some of the hero cards you will be utilizing. Things like Coup de Grace, things like Assassinate if you're playing Sniper. And as such, initiative is important. Another reason initiative can be important, even if you're talking about like draft, for example, there's been plenty of times where I've used Hipfire, and then because you have initiative, you get to take the next action right away. It basically means go again. And then you can combine it with something like Grazing Shot, where, you know, even if 4 damage wasn't enough to kill off an enemy hero, maybe 6 damage is, and then you've still prevented them from doing something that turn. So Hipfire does see play in Constructed, does see play in Draft. Very, very good card. Lots of uses. And initiative, if you haven't figured it out by now, is pretty important in Artifact. Next up we have Murder Plot. This is 4 mana to give a black hero +8 attack this round. Choose a combat target for it. I have seen this played in Constructed a very small number of times, and every time it was in those mono black aggro decks. Being able to give your hero +8 attack and then either make its target be an enemy hero that they weren't directly across from, or I have seen people use this to correct arrows, much the way we were kind of talking about with Forward Charge earlier. You choose the combat target for it. So if this is played on a hero that should have been attacking a tower but instead got a bad arrow towards a creep, you can buff the hero and then tell it to still attack the tower, getting 8 bonus damage out of it as well. So I have seen it in mono black decks, not very often though, as far as Constructed goes. And I don't mind running it in Draft if I'm running a fair number of black heroes. Again, because this is a black hero and not just any allied hero or any unit, you want to make sure you have enough good targets to support it and make, you know, the best out of the retargeting and situational impact that this has. So, you know, if you're splashing black, I probably wouldn't run it. If you've got 2 black heroes, you know, maybe it would kind of depend on the heroes that you were running for me. Like if you've got like 2 Necrophos, I'm probably not running Murder Plot. But if you've got, you know, Phantom Assassin and a Bounty Hunter, then sure, I'd give it a shot. Yeah, it's okay. It's not great. You're not picking it high in Draft. It's situationally good. Pick Off. So this is like the half-brother of Hipfire. This is 4 mana, deal 4 damage to a unit. But the difference is, instead of getting initiative, you get to do it to a unit in any lane. In case you haven't figured out the theme from the other reviews yet, this is pretty good because of the cross-lane capability. Gank is good for a reason. Grazing Shot is, you know, borderline playable for a reason. Relentless Pursuit, borderline playable for a reason. Being able to impact other lanes and potentially lock out heroes from taking actions because of cross-lane kills is very, very powerful. So this does sometimes see play in Constructed. A lot of times you'll see people either run Hipfire or run Pick Off, or maybe they do like a, you know, a 2-and-2 split or something. But it does see play in Constructed, and it definitely sees play in Draft. I think this is a very valuable card in Draft, actually. Probably not first pick material. Like, I'm not gonna take this over a Thunderhide pack or anything, but I will prioritize this pretty high in a pack, you know, depending on what the other options are. It's very powerful. And the last black spell is called the Cover of Night. It is a whopping 7 mana, and it is essentially Relentless Pursuit, but kind of on steroids. You move an allied black hero to another lane. Give that hero +4 attack and +7 siege until the end of its next combat phase. And that wording means that you always get that bonus. So even if you're in the 3rd lane and you have to jump to the 1st lane, you don't have to worry about like not getting benefit. It's until that unit's next combat phase. So this is, mobility for a black hero, and it provides some punch for trying to finish off a tower. This does not see a lot of play, and the big reason for that is simply at 7 mana, the effect isn't really worth the cost. There's a lot of really powerful cards at 6 and 7 mana that you can play, and even if you're not playing those cards, there's a lot of powerful combinations of cards, cards that cost 3 and cards that cost 4 that you can pair together that are really powerful. And being able to move this and just essentially get some extra damage on a tower is not good enough to make the cut in Constructed. And because it is a black hero, it's harder to play in Draft, but unlike Relentless Pursuit, this costs 7. So you have to really commit to this strategy, whereas Relentless Pursuit, being 1 mana, you can still do a bunch of stuff in your lane and then very cheaply hop your hero over to another lane where it might need to assist. This is like a full-on commitment to my play for this turn for this hero is to go to this other lane and punch the tower. And that's, in my experience anyway, just not as valuable. I'm not going to say that it doesn't see play in Draft. It's just not the sort of card that you're picking high in a pack. You certainly don't prioritize it, and you have to have kind of a lot working for you in your draft to make this work. So yeah, that's it. That's the end of the black spells. So if you made it this far, you are a saint, an angel. I don't know why anyone would listen to me drone this long, but you did, so I appreciate it. And again, if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm doing these review videos for all of the other cards in Artifact, so you can check those out if you have not already. Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next video.